Welcome to this week's workshop. This is Rethinking Exercise, how to make movement work for you. And in this workshop, we're going to explore why so many of us feel resistance to exercise and how we can shift our mindset to make movement something that we actually look forward to instead of dread. I am Coach Heather or Dr. Heather Bear. I am a mind body medicine practitioner. I'm a certified nutrition specialist and integrative wellness coach, and also a clinical hypnotist. And ultimately, I use all of these different modalities to help us, just become that constant work in progress, always taking one step forward in that direction of self improvement. And so, what we're going to talk about today, as I've already set up a little bit, we're going to go through, why does exercise feel like a bad word? Why do we resist it? What is this negative feedback loop that actually cues our mindset to push against movement? We'll then go through redefining exercise and talk about the science of movement and why exercise is so important for our health, for our energy, for longevity. We'll go through some mental, some quick to break through mental barriers, how to shift from that dread mentality to a mindset of enjoyment. And that's going to involve, making movement effortless, some strategies to help you integrate movement into your everyday. So that becomes more of a quality of life or just a lifestyle than something that you're trying to do. And of course, we will use the tiny habits model. This is one of the proven and most effective ways to be able to integrate changes into your life using that tiny habits. And so let's kick things off. Let's just dive in. Why does exercise feel like a bad word? And I literally grabbed this idea because the other day when I was in my car, well, actually it was a while ago because it was when we were talking about, all of the things from January and all of um the mindset things that people go through. Oh, I'm going to make this New Year's resolution. I'm going to work towards this and I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to get healthier. And we go through all of these things, right? And all of the people on the radio, all they could talk about was, oh gosh, exercise. Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, it's the worst thing in the world. And of course, like the callers that came in, it was one after the other of all the things that people hate about exercise. And so, it's no wonder, we typically associate exercise with punishment, right? We got to burn calories, we've got to fix flaws, we got to make up for these bad choices. And of course, that can pull all kinds of unrealistic fitness standards, right? We think that we get this ideal picture of what we should be working towards, right? And then when we don't get that, we have these feelings of shame and guilt and, these feelings of not being enough. And of course, when you're going into something like that, when you feel like you've got to do something specific to fit this into your schedule, this can bring about all kinds of things. And of course, then you start going into even like past trauma, past experiences, all of the negative self-talk, all of this stuff starts to create resistance. And so when you think about how the word exercise makes you feel, when you think about, okay, I need to, you know, increase exercise. I need to incorporate exercise into my day. What does that stir in you emotionally? For most of us, there's an association with guilt, with punishment or obligation. And if there's not, then it's very likely that you have a very good relationship with movement in your day to day. For those of you who don't, though, we're going to try to change and challenge that and see if we can't rewrite that relationship with movement. So let's talk about the negative feedback loop. And of course, I'm very science minded. Negative feedback loop means there's something that's feeding into this, right? It's going to be activating something, it's feeding into this. But we're going to be talking about this negative feedback loop of why we resist movement. And of course, again, what's interesting is that we resist exercise even though we know it's good for us. And that's why this workshop today, it's not about all of the amazing benefits of exercise and why you should do it, because we know we for the most part we know exactly what exercise is going to do for us. But we're going to talk about some negative feedback loops. And this first one is, this obligation, resistance, guilt, avoidance, and repeat. And so this whole cycle, we have this obligation, right? Resistance, then it has guilt, and then we have the avoidance of the behavior. And so this is the common cycle that so many of us get stuck in, and we don't even realize it. It starts again with that obligation. We feel like we should work out, right? There's some sort of moral duty or requirement. And of course, that turns into resistance because no one wants to be forced to be put into something, even if it's our own thoughts. And then when we resist exercise, we inevitably avoid it, which of course then leads to guilt, that little voice inside our heads telling us that we're lazy or we're undisciplined or we're failing. And so here's where it gets tricky. Guilt doesn't just it doesn't just sabotage that, right? It literally completely unravels this motivation to move. It literally makes us more likely to avoid exercise altogether. And of course, that's because it's not just about movement. This is now about self-judgment. And so then we can start to feel the pressure, right, to exercise that much further, right? And that's going to then lead to rebellion and overall avoidance. You become one of those, the people who exercise become one of those people. And so if you ever notice how someone tells you that you have to do something, right? When someone says, "Oh, you have to do that," you literally have this instinct to do the opposite. That's called psychological resistance. And it's our it's our brain's built-in resistance to being controlled. And so even when when we're the ones setting the rules, when it's our idea to go exercise, the moment that exercise starts to feel like an obligation, that resistance starts to kick in. And so instead of being drawn naturally to movement, we start making excuses and putting it off. And so we're literally rebelling against ourselves. We then have this all or nothing mindset that we're so easily, doing to ourselves, which makes it really hard to stay consistent. We start to create rules and regimens and requirements of how we actually fit the box or fit this idea of what exercise is and isn't. And that's another huge psychological trap. This all or nothing mindset, not only with exercise, with many of the things that we do, but this is again the idea of if it not being that perfect workout, well, then it's not worth doing at all. If I don't have 60 minutes to throw in, to the gym, then I just can't work out. It's not going to happen. And so of course that doesn't make sense because, a 30-minute workout, a 30-minute walk in the park is still more beneficial than nothing when you're comparing it against this or this, right? And so again, getting out of that mindset of, well, if I can't do a full, fill in the blank there, then why bother? The truth is that all of these movements count. And you've been learning this over and over again, right? Throughout these weeks. The small movements are what matter most because that's going to build consistency. And so if we force ourselves to believe that only, quote unquote, serious or real or hard workouts matter, then we end up doing nothing at all. And of course, finally, last but not least, the more we dread exercise, the less we are likely to do it. Our brain is literally wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so if exercise feels like pain and punishment, your brain is going to find ways to avoid it. It's going to have, distractions, procrastinations, or justifications as to why today isn't the right day to get started. And so this is why willpower alone is not going to work. If you associate movement with stress, you're not going to stay consistent. All right, so let's talk about why movement matters. And again, we're not going to get into all of the nitty-gritty, but again, just to remind you and to kind of show how we're so good at self-sabotaging ourselves, right? Movement boosts mood. There's literally endorphins that are released, feel-good hormones in our body that make us crave it. The more we do it, the more our body will start to crave it. And so it's a lot of times just getting over that initial hump, because as soon as you start to do it consistently, it's going to boost your mood and you're going to be able to link that to positive feedback loops. You're going to have that positive feedback loop where you do exercise and you feel good and your body's going to want to do more of it. And of course, that's going to then give you all of these wonderful benefits that we are so aware of, reducing the risk of chronic disease. Again, things that are directly linked to movement, things like heart disease, diabetes, cognitive decline, right? And dementia and cognitive decline, huge right now. So much so that we're calling this type 3 diabetes because the massive prevalence within our society. Movement is going to help ward off that cognitive decline that inevitably can happen as we get older. And of course, it's going to improve our energy levels. It's going to support mental clarity in that short term as well. And that's some of the biggest things that can impact us right now, right? We go throughout our day, we get stressed, we get in these moods where we're kind of up and down, these highs and lows. Our energy drops. And these are all things that we deal with on a regular basis. And of course, movement, something as simple as breaking up your day with a walk, with a 15-minute workout, something like that. It's going to make all of this go away. And of course, it's going to strengthen muscles and joints. This is a huge thing as well as we get older. Who says that you have to be, immobile when you're 80, 90 years old and, unable to enjoy life and enjoy yourself? There are plenty of people who are living examples that is simply not true. If you believe it to be true, yeah, maybe that's going to be true for you. But ultimately, it doesn't have to be that way. And if we can move and we can keep our muscles strong, we are going to be able to move well into our golden years and just be able to improve that quality of life, enjoy life as we get older, as we're able to retire. We can actually live that happy life, go on vacation, be with our families. So lots of really important benefits, the science of movements, lots of really key things tied into just being physically active. And so again, how do we overcome some of these mental barriers? Well, we've already talked about this negative mindset, right? This negative feedback loop and things that we kind of get stuck in. But how do we start to overcome some of that? Because it's one thing to be aware of it and know that it's going on. It's another thing to actively work towards removing that, right? From your feedback loop. So a couple of things you can do is changing your language, right? Changing the way you think, changing the way that you speak, shifting from I have to I get to. And this is a huge mindset shift. This is moving from obligation to opportunity. And so if you think about this, think about like, oh, I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to work. If you're thinking about it from that mindset, you're probably going to be, oh, I got to wake up. You're going to groan about it. You're not going to be so excited as that alarm's getting up. But if you got to wake up at 5 a.m. for a flight to your dream vacation, you're probably going to be a lot more excited, right? You're going to change the way you think about it. You're going to change your language, and it's literally going to change and impact the experience that you have when you're getting up for that, either the flight or for the work, right? So again, same action, same exact action of getting up at 5 a.m., but a completely different mindset and a completely different outcome. And so when we can view movement as something when we view movement as something we have to do, we are going to have, again, that resistance. But when we see it as something that we get to do, because we have the ability, because we have the opportunity, then it's going to start to shift our experience. And of course, you can also focus on how movement makes you feel, not just the outcome. So often we get focused on the results instead of the experience itself. And again, we say things like, I need to work out so that I can lose weight, or I need to exercise so that I don't feel guilty about what I ate. But we only focus on these long-term results. We're disconnected from the immediate benefits. And so you can do this by asking yourself, how do I feel when I move my body? Do I feel energized? Do I feel less stressed? Am I clear-headed? Really tapping into how you're feeling during, even afterwards, and being able to be connected to that. In fact, research shows that even 5 minutes of movement, it can boost your mood, it can improve your focus, it can reduce anxiety. So if you start to pay attention to how you feel after movement, instead of just the outcome, you start to create that positive reinforcement, that positive feedback loop. And of course, you can release that perfectionist mindset, right? We are always, chronically dealing with this perfectionist mindset, this all or nothing mindset. The idea here is that congruence is key. And congruence means aligning your thoughts, aligning your words, aligning your actions. This is how you actually follow through on what you want. One of the biggest reasons people don't stay consistent is because they set these unrealistic expectations. So if you tell yourself that you have to work out for an hour, 5 days a week, but your reality doesn't support that, you're going to break the promise that you made to yourself and feel like a failure. So instead, you want to focus on small wins, right? 5 push-ups are better than 0. A 10-minute walk is better than sitting all day. And dancing to one song at the end of your day is still better, right? Than doing nothing. And so the idea here is small, consistent movement is going to build momentum. Small actions are going to build your confidence, and that confidence is going to help contribute to the consistency. And so you want to make things small and sustainable. So small and sustainable, again, that is the name of the game. And so think about the first time that you learned to drive. right? Go back to that time when you were learning how to drive the very first time. You didn't start by merging onto a 6-lane highway at rush hour, right? You probably started in a parking lot, learning how to steer, how to stop. And over time, your confidence grew. You took bigger challenges, right? You were able to set the bar higher. And so, exercise is no different. You want to start where you are. If you've never done a structured workout, that's probably going to feel pretty overwhelming. Just set your goal at moving more throughout the day. If an hour at the gym feels impossible, start with 5 minutes at home. Really, the best plan is to do something that you can actually do consistently. You want to start with small, sustainable actions that are going to compound over time, just like interest in a bank account. So, this is stuff that we already know. This is stuff that makes sense. And so, how do we start to make movement just part of, just a natural part of the day? Because in the end, I always try to teach that movement shouldn't necessarily be for the majority of us, for the most of us. For most of us, we're not exercising. Most of us are not exercising regularly. So for most of us, it's more about thinking about how to move more every day. And you do that consistently long enough, well, then maybe trying to figure out how actual like exercise, weight training, things like that, or maybe a sports or something like that start to get to be part of your day. But for most of us, it's all about making movement part of your lifestyle, working towards an active lifestyle where it's just natural for you to like not even have to think about it. That, oh, I've been sitting for a while. I'm going to get up. I'm going to take a walk. No, I've been sitting for too long. I need to prioritize a 20-minute walk because otherwise I know my back is going to hurt. So that all of this stuff is like kind of just secondhand for you, second nature. And so how do we start to do that? Well, again, we use the tiny habits method. You want to pair movement with daily habits, things that you're going to be doing consistently, right? So walking over after a meal, stretching before you get out of bed, stretching, before you go to bed, wherever you can start to fit little tiny moments of movement in with things that you're already doing. That's going to be easier for you to remember. It's going to be easier to pair stuff. You of course can also, try to find things that are fun and engaging. Think back to the time when you were a kid and you used to just be outside enjoying your day. What were you doing? Was it swimming all day in the summertime? Was it going on these amazing hikes? Was it dancing? Was it a sport? There's all these different opportunities that we have to be active. If we just kind of take the time to think about, what is it that I really enjoy doing? And of course, that's going to tap into all kinds of other wonderful things. There's these layers of benefits. If you're dancing, you're probably dancing with somebody else. If you're playing sports, you're playing with somebody else. A lot of these things we do, and that's going to boost on social engagement activities as well, which is going to have, all kinds of benefits. The other thing that we can do is, using the power of now. When the opportunity arises, if you're deciding, okay, I'm going to start paying attention to opportunities that come my way to be more, more active, to be able to move more. Well, use the power of now. There's no better time than now. I need to take a walk. I should take a walk. As soon as that thought crosses your mind, no, you get up and you go take a walk, whether it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or you can actually, squeeze in a 20-minute walk. As soon as you start to think I should, you stop what you're doing, you get up and you go do it. That's the power of now. And of course, you can always get an accountability and a support partner, using your family, your friends, your coworkers, trying to engage in some camaraderie, right? Maybe having a challenge, a step challenge, which, is always fun. And you can use activity trackers and see who's got more steps for the day, or, maybe it's something that's going to be more fun, like playing sports or going dancing. Accountability and support is going to be huge. Of course, research supports that when we have accountability, we're more than 40% likely to reach our goals. So again, lots and lots of different ideas to be able to just make movement just a natural part of your day. And so let's also, get through this idea of like what exercise is and isn't. Let's just start to redefine this. Ultimately, we want to forget rigid rules. Any intentional movement counts towards exercise. And of course, as far as definitions and guidelines, from walking to stretching to dancing, if you are engaged in some sort of movement that's going to require you to flex your muscle, that's going to require an elevation in your heart rate, that's movement. And you'll be surprised. simply standing up and sitting back down in your chair, that's going to require flexion in your muscles. You're going to have an elevation in your heart rate, so it doesn't take anything, specific or structured. To my next point, exercise doesn't have to be structured or intense to be effective. For the longest time, I resisted yoga. And I mean, I do yoga now, and I love it. I don't know how I ended up becoming a yoga teacher. I taught it for many years. But for so long, I resisted it because I had in my mind that exercise, you had to sweat, you had to be, pumping weights, and, you had to be sore the next day. And I obviously wasn't doing yoga correctly, because you can certainly be sore the next day. You can certainly be sweaty. But I just, for whatever reason, I had completely tuned it out. But that's, of course, that's not a great way of thinking. Exercise doesn't have to be structured, doesn't have to be intense to be effective. That can turn a lot of us off, especially if we have physical limitations, especially if, we haven't moved in a while and we think like, oh my gosh, I've had people come to group fitness classes with me who haven't worked out in a very long time. They're very out of shape. And then they try to keep up with the rest of the group, because, for whatever reason, they think like they have to, they try to just go, go, go. And of course, what happens? Well, they end up getting sick. They end up throwing up, and they have a miserable time. And do you think they come back? No, of course not. They like, that reinforces like, that was the worst experience ever. That was so awful. Well, no, you just set the bar too high. You have to meet yourself where you're at. And ideally, it should fit into your lifestyle. We've already gone through this, but if you can't fit 5 days a week of, an hour at the gym, which of course requires that maybe 10-minute drive there, 10-minute drive back. So you're looking at 90 minutes minimum. If you don't have that, that doesn't mean that you can't exercise. You want to find something that fits into your lifestyle. You want to make yourself feel good. The more you can do it, those feel good chemicals are going to be released. If you can just break through that initial barrier, you're going to have all of that positive stuff working for you. You're going to start to crave it. All right. So let's, again, once more, go through these tiny habits for lasting change. Because now that we've talked about shifting your mindset, we really want to break down how to actually get started in a way that's going to feel effortless instead of overwhelming. The first is, you want to start ridiculously small. I'm thinking like 1-minute movements. The biggest mistake people make is starting way too big, way too fast. And so when you set that bar too high, you're going to create friction, you're going to create resistance, and that's going to lead to quitting. So instead of all of that, you're going to make it so small that you can't fail. 1 minute of stretching, 10 squats while brushing your teeth, a 30-second dance break before you go to bed, right? Little tiny things, whatever works for you. And of course, this works because the hardest part is getting started. Once you begin, you're that much more likely to keep going. And if you can keep it going and stay consistent, it's easier to build. And of course, you want to stack movements onto existing habits. Behavior change research, it shows that new habits stick better when they're paired with something that you already do. So instead of trying to carve out, exercise time, just try attaching movement to something that's automatic. You could have a walking meeting, pacing while being on the phone, stretching while your coffee brews. This is a really simple way to add mobility to your morning routine. And of course, you can do body weight exercises any time of the day. You could, drop and do a couple sit-ups. You could do push-ups before you go to bed. You could do squats, right, while brushing your teeth. Just thinking about moving as much as you can. Of course, yeah, your family may make fun of you. That's okay. They'll catch on, and they'll probably be doing it too. And then this will just be something that your family does. And it's gonna be for the better of your family. And of course, the idea here is, if you've ever done this trick where you left your gym shoes by the front door, right, to remind you of that workout, then you've used this strategy before. The difference is, there's still a lot more things that have to happen when you leave your gym shoes by the front door. If you have it paired to a habit that you're already going to be doing, it's less memory, it's less cues. And of course, you want to make it easy and enjoyable. You want to make something, that you're going to enjoy doing. If you hate something, if you dread it, you're not going to do it. And there's just not a great way around that. So instead of forcing yourself into things that you don't want to do, try to choose things that you actually like. So really, taking the time to think, what is it that I enjoy doing? Do I love music? So, maybe I do. Maybe I want to dance more. Do I love nature? Do I really crave being in green space? If that's the case, go for a walk. Do I love the beach? Yeah, maybe I'm going to try to find spaces where I can be around water and find a lake that I can go walk around, or maybe even the beach on the weekends. If you enjoy competition and you miss out on team sports, then hey, maybe this is your sign to go and pick that back up. Think about kids. The more you see them play, right? They're moving because it's fun. They're not moving because it's exercise. They're moving because movement feels fun. And of course, the more they do it, the more they want to do it. And it's easy for them to be consistent. And of course, you want to track your wins. You want to track the small wins that you have to reinforce the progress. Taking time to check in. How do I feel? Does this feel good? Is my concentration better? How's my stress, right? Being able to track those things like, wow, I did that and now I feel better. Progress builds motivation, but only if you notice it. And so you don't want to just focus on big milestones. You want to track all of these little things that happen. So, let's say, wow, I moved 5 minutes today. I reached my goal. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. I walked instead of driving to the store. This acknowledgement is going to help our brains rewire, because our brains love rewards. And the more you recognize this progress, the more likely you are to keep going, to stay aware, and to see those opportunities to move. When this is all about making this a lifestyle. And so one last thing, one last little carrot to dangle before we go: the link between exercise and productivity. And so everything I've talked about so far, if it hasn't convinced you yet, there's one last huge benefit. And that is that exercise isn't just good for your body or your mind or, all of the other things that we've talked about. It's one of the easiest ways to boost both productivity and mental performance. And so think about it. So often we think that we're too busy for exercise. That is the number one thing that I hear. I'm too busy. I don't have any time. But the irony is that not moving actually makes us less efficient. And so the idea here is that exercise increases blood flow to the brain, right? Our heart is pumping. We're going to have more blood going. So we have more blood flow to the brain. That's going to improve focus, memory, and problem solving. In fact, studies show that even a 10-minute walk can boost brain function more effectively than having that cup of coffee that's going to make you come up and then come back down. It also reduces mental fatigue. So if you hit that afternoon slump where your brain starts to feel like mush and you just can't, you feel like you're hitting a wall, movement is actually one of the quickest ways to recharge. It also makes work feel easier. Exercise lowers our stress hormones, which makes us more resilient under pressure and better able to adapt and handle challenges. We can also work towards these short movement breaks. When we have short movement breaks in between all of the tasks that we've got set up for ourselves throughout the day, we have better work output. In fact, research shows that brief activity breaks, even just stretching or a quick walk, improves our productivity exponentially and boosts our creativity. And so again, this isn't about adding another task to your plate. It's about working smarter, not harder. And of course, that's how we avoid burnout. When you move more, you feel better. You can think more clearly and you can get more done. You're more productive. And so if you've ever thought, well, I don't have time to exercise, remember this, flip it. I don't have time not to move. All right, so on that note, let's go through some quick tips to get started. I don't have tons, this is very straightforward. Just trying to give you some hacks to be able to just notice how you think, what you think when it comes to exercise. The first is we want to reframe it. Movement is not a punishment, right? We want to think about ways to reward our body. And so movement should add to your life, not drain it. You just want to start where you are and you want to move in ways that feel good. We want to break the cycle. We want to be able to see and notice when we're in that negative feedback loop, right? We want to notice where our thoughts, our words, our actions are when it comes to movement. We want to see where we are in that cycle and then break it. No more all or nothing thinking. It's going to make it really helpful if you find what you love to do. Go back to that time when you were a kid. Go back to the time when you were in college. What did you like to do? How did you move? It probably wasn't a chore back then. And so just make it enjoyable, make it natural. And then once you do, small Start small, 1 minute, right? 1 minute of push-ups. So find, a quick stretch while you're waiting for your coffee to brew. Start small, stay consistent, and then celebrate those small wins. That's going to make all the difference. All right, well, that is what I have for you this week. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you were able to take away something that's going to make movement just that much easier to be able to incorporate into your daily life. Again, it's all about lifestyle. Thanks so much for attending. If you have any extra questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You know that you can always drop me a message or a comment in this, and I will be happy to answer it for you.